off of some talentless mess based on who their fathers are. What can you as children of the Most High God be based on? With drive and education and talent, what can you really create with that same confidence of knowing who your father is? I was at an event in Los Angeles with Ken Cragen, and he's actually a famous Hollywood agent. He's developed careers for Kenny Rogers and Lionel Richie, and he wrote a book, Life is a Contact Sport. And I asked him, because I ask everybody, whenever I have a chance to interact with somebody, I always ask questions. I said, what's the difference between a star and a superstar? Because there are some stars that if you see them on Rodeo Drive or Hollywood Boulevard, you say, oh, okay, that's her. But then there's other stars that are like superstars that stop traffic. They're always on the newspaper, tabloid, magazines, and the cover, and everybody wants to know what's going on with them. And he indicated that lots of people have talent. Lots of people work hard and stay focused. But the difference might surprise you. The difference between the star and the superstar is actually their willingness to get help with their goals. They network, they work with contacts, and they commit to their personal development. Because by admitting weakness in certain areas, you can always overcome what you're willing to identify. But if you stay in the dark and you stay in denial, like it doesn't exist, how do you ever overcome that? You can't. The next thing I'd like to visit with you about is your currency and your challenges. Because maybe someone told you that on your path to being a millionaire and sustaining it, that there wouldn't be any challenges and you just get on the road and everything works out fine and you join the club and now you've got millions and you keep going and everything is fine. But for those of you who've been in the club more than about 2 hours and realize that that's not necessarily the case and challenges do exist, I want to remind you of the story of the king and the peasant. There once was a king who actually took and put a boulder in the middle of the road, the main road leading into his kingdom. And then he went and hid behind a tree. And he watched. And he watched while the wealthy merchants and the aristocrat walked by and complained that the king needed to do a better job and keep the roads clear and what an inconvenience to have to walk around this boulder. And, you know, they complained and fussed and had a major problem with it. But then along comes a peasant. And he's carrying a big load. And he gets to the boulder. And he sits down his load. And he begins to attempt to move the boulder. And he struggles and he works and he pushes and he strains, and he didn't give up until he was able to move the boulder out of the main road, out of the way of the main road. He goes to pick up his load and continue on his way. Well, as he goes to pick up his load, he notices a purse. And in the purse are a bunch of gold coins with a note that says that these coins and this newfound wealth is for the person who is willing to move the boulder. Because that means you understand that every obstacle presents an opportunity to improve your condition.
Right.
Now I know that most people think that their greatest obstacle is money. That once you get enough of it, you won't have any more obstacles, you won't have any more challenges, you won't have any more issues. Once again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's not the case. Think about Michael Jackson. Arguably the best pop entertainer in the world. At the time of his death, he was paying a doctor 100,000 US dollars, which is what, about 700,000 rand every month, just so he could go to sleep. Now, if money got rid of all your issues, would you need to spend 700,000 rand every month just to go to sleep? Probably not. So understand, it's not just the money that's holding you back. What you have to do is stop looking at what you don't have and focus on what you do have. Because oftentimes the reason we can't count our blessings is not because they don't exist, it's because maybe we need to go back and learn how to count.
That's right.
You have to get to the place where what's inside of you is so powerful that you believe against all odds that you can beat anything that comes against you. And that you truly, truly believe that greater is he that is in me than he that's in the world. Is that how the scripture goes?
Yes.
Or is it greater is he that's in the church? Or greater is the pastor that can lay hands on me? Or greater is the person on the other end of the psychic hotline? Or greater is the voodoo consultant? No, it's greater is he that is in me than he that's in the world.
Amen.
And what's inside of you is the most powerful weapon for your circumstances. And obstacles exist and circumstances exist. I mean, gender, race, family dynamics, birth order, all of those things we can't change. They are what they are, and everybody has some type of circumstance. Nobody has perfect circumstance. I'm reminded of a story of John Roebling, who was an engineer. He's a famous engineer in the States. And in 1883, he wanted to build a bridge to connect New York with Long Island. For those of you who haven't been to the States and been to New York, I know sometimes it's hard when I'm out speaking to people, it's hard for them to fathom that Long Island, which is a very populated city right outside of New York, is truly an island by every definition. And so he wanted to build a suspension bridge to connect New York City with Long Island. Because up until that point, you had to catch a ferry over. And the experts said it could never, ever be done. That it wasn't practical, that a suspension bridge had never been built before with no poles, no posts, that you just can't suspend a bridge in midair and think it's going to be sturdy enough to support things. But he had a vision, and he knew deep in his heart it could be done. So he convinced his son Washington, who was a young engineering student, to help him build the bridge. So together, father and son, they set out to plan and think about their obstacles and be prepared to overcome them. They hired a crew, and they began to build their dream bridge of their vision. Everything started out fine, as most things do, but then something tragic happens. While the bridge is under construction, Roebling gets killed, and his son Washington is left with brain damage. So now Washington's in the hospital. He can't walk, he can't talk, he can't even move. So then here come the negative people, and everybody's heard them before. We told you not to do that. Shouldn't have tried it. It was a crazy idea. What would ever think you could accomplish something like that? But Washington laid in his hospital bed and was determined to figure out how can he complete this bridge. He tried to inspire the work crew and his friends, and they said, "You're crazy to try and do this again. Look what's happened." But he gives his account that one day he was laying in his hospital bed, and the curtains kind of blew open, and he saw a light and a vision where God was showing him, don't give up, don't let go of your vision, build the bridge. He had the use of one index finger, and so he had an idea. He developed a code of communication with his wife by tapping on her forearm with his one index finger. And as foolish as it seemed, the bridge project was underway again. And for 13 years, Washington tapped out how to build the bridge with his index finger on his wife's forearm. And at the time of completion, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world. And today it's known as the Brooklyn Bridge that connects New York City with Long Island. It still stands today without any renovations and without any changes. And it stands as a testament to the will of the human spirit that every day millions of cars go back and forth on this bridge, 13 years tapped out on a forefinger. Obstacles, challenges, but determination to overcome. Okay, you're thinking, all right, she's from the States, and why is she sitting here telling us about some white engineers in the United States? We really don't even care. Let me try and meet you closer to home. Think of Wilma Rudolph. She was born 20th of 22 children to poor sharecroppers in the rural segregated South. And again, for those of you too young to remember, And most of you, again, look like you're too young to remember Jim Crow in the segregated South. It would be like apartheid was in South Africa. That's how blacks were treated and dealt with. Wilma was born prematurely, and the doctor told her parents she probably would not survive. And as if that's not bad enough, at the age of 4, she got pneumonia and scarlet fever. Ended up with a paralyzed left leg, and was told she would never walk normally, but they developed a brace for her, a metal brace, that she wore on her left leg. But at 9 years old, she got tired of the metal brace and took it off. And her family thought, you can't do that, you need this brace. But she was determined. By the age of 13, Wilma had developed a rhythmic limp. The doctor said was nothing short of a miracle for her to be able to do this. But she wasn't satisfied with walking. She had a vision of being a runner. And so she entered her first race and came in last. Everyone told her to quit. The vision of her being a runner, somebody who didn't even think that she would be able to walk, that it was a crazy idea. She wouldn't give up. She held on to her vision. And for the next few years, she kept trying, and every race she entered, she came in last. But then one day she entered a race and she won. And from then on, she won every race she entered. And this poor little sickly black girl from the rural South, who was told she may not live, and who was told she would never walk, went on to win 3 Olympic gold medals for the United States track team. Now, how does that happen? Because there are some people we all know that have circumstances, and they stay in their circumstances forever. But what do these people have in common? They don't let other people discourage them for what God has for them.
That's right.
They hold on to that vision themselves. Because in both cases, people were speaking negative and saying it wouldn't be able to be done, it wasn't possible. But they recognize that everybody has less than perfect circumstance. But the ones who live the designer life have simply made a choice not to let their circumstance become their crutch for not achieving their goals and desires. Another challenge we look at is time and timing. That I don't have enough time to work on myself, develop myself, run my business, and do all these other things. But recognize that you make time for what matters most to you. Now, I was reading an article here, this is a sidebar, somebody's going to have to tell me about when this is over. Because coming from the West, this is truly something I don't understand. I read an article about the countries that take the most vacation time versus the ones that take the least amount of vacation time. And very predictable, the top 3 countries that take the most vacation time, France, Canada, the United States. You know, most people can figure out the most absorbed people in the West take the most vacation time. But what was very striking to me is the countries that take the least amount of vacation time. Japan was number 1, and then South Africa was number 2. So somebody's going to have to explain to me when this is over, why you all don't take vacation? What is that exactly? Are you workaholics, overachievers? I'm not sure, but I would love to know what that is. But understand there's no perfect timing. And you can actually think yourself tired. Now, I came up with this little saying when I was actually a college student taking a philosophy class, and I'm sure it sounded a whole lot more profound then than it does now, but it still actually makes sense. That what tires us most in life is not what we're actually doing at the moment, but the thought of what we need to be doing. And you will think yourself into exhaustion. You will look up and think, oh, I'm so tired. And all you've been doing is what you think you should be doing, but you're thinking about it instead of just doing it. Think about how much energy you need if I told everybody to stand up and then try to sit down. How do you try to sit down? Aren't you either standing or sitting? And then if you try, you're something like this, which actually is more tiring than standing or sitting. And so if you stop trying so much and started doing more, you may find yourself not thinking into this state of tired and exhaustion. And so the next time you think, okay, I need to stay up and work on the plan, develop my notes, get ready for the meeting tomorrow, redo the agenda, whatever it is that you need to do, instead of sitting on the sofa watching reality television while Paris and Kim and the rest of them are getting paid big money to be talentless, you'll say, you know what, I'm not going to be tired. I'm going to get up and do what I need to do.
That's right.
The next challenge we face is the challenge of fear. And this is a biggie. We all have it. Some of us have it more than others. There's the fear of failure and the fear of success. And did you know they all originate from the same emotion? There's only two main emotions. Everything else is a byproduct of two emotions. There's love, which produces joy and peace and happiness and goodwill and the belief that you can accomplish your vision. And then there's fear. And fear produces anger and sadness and depression and worry and angst. And so they both come from the same place. Yet we tend to let fear dictate our choices. So let's look at some of the things we're afraid of, because oddly enough, you know how they say there's nothing new under the sun? Some of the things we're afraid of right now are the same things that the disciples were afraid of 2,000 years ago. Like, we haven't advanced any more than that. We have the same fear. Fear of new experiences. Matthew 14. They saw Jesus walking on the water and they were scared to death. The Bible talks about they were terrified. They screamed with fright. And I know for most people in this room, just the thought of Jesus walking to you on the water is way too deep. So I don't want to stretch you that far tonight. But some of you are afraid to try anything new. You will stick with the same old thing, the same old people, go to the same places, and not stretch yourself to do something new and different. But how are you going to learn and grow and command millions if you're not willing to experience something else and to try something new? Because if you keep doing the same thing you've been doing, expecting a different result, that is actually the definition of insanity. When my son turned 16, my husband gave him the choice, what would you like to do for your 16th birthday? And he said he wanted to go skydiving. Now, I looked at this kid, wondering who raised him and why he needed to seek a thrill like this.